Welcome to the Impact Effect podcast. And I have an amazing guest for you today, Brandon Gaydorus, and he is doing it. And when I say doing it, I mean he's got his hands in all the things, whether it's events, whether he's publishing another book of his, whether it's speaker school, whether he's working with youths and partnering with different folks in the community. I mean, this man set a goal. He's living it, he's taking action, and he's just showing up and doing it. So I am excited to dive in and welcome Brandon to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. It's interesting when I was in my first career, I was really excited about the things that led to the momentum of eventually the result. I used to be in golf fitness, and I would go to all these places to meet different people, learn from different people. And when I finally got the results I wanted, I didn't feel the fulfillment that I thought you would get. And with Warm Heart Life, one of my goals has been to take a lot of the things I learned from that and see what's possible in the personal development world. And one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to get around like-minded people. And I went to this event in Los Angeles a couple of years ago, and I was able to meet you and to hear about the different events that you've had, to hear about the things that you've done to bring personal development to this world and impact. It's been very cool. And we had a great conversation a week or two ago, and we were able to catch up. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today, because I feel like not only will there be lots of impact on this call, but with everything that you're doing in general, I'm just excited to hear where you're going with that as well.
I love it, man. I love it. Yeah, it's funny, right? These things happen, people get together, and where do you find people in alignment? Where do you find people in your life that are doing things in their own way, but have a lot of synergy? And that relationship with Brandon and myself is where it started, right? We were at an event. We were leveling up. We were getting around different people, different crowds. And then here we are today shooting a podcast and talking about life and business and all the things. So as you know, first question always on the Impact Effect podcast, how do you define impact and how do you show up in the world and provide impact today?
Yeah, it's interesting because one, it's a great question. You can look at that in so many different ways, but I've always looked at impact as like, when I'm not here anymore, are the things that people were inspired by from me, whether it was a conversation that we had or maybe stuff I put out there in the world, like videos or books, are those still inspiring people to make this world a better place? And I've always felt like if I could do that, then there would be impact that happened from my life. And so one of my first experiences doing this was I just put out a book in the golf fitness world, which was my first career. And as I was finishing that up, I said, I really want to put a personal development book out there, because for those people who don't know me, which is probably almost everyone listening, when I was 26 years old, I got voted top 50 in America as a golf fitness trainer. And I was the youngest person on that list. And so I had learned a lot of personal development and just used that towards the field I was interested in. And I was like, these principles that I'd learned from all these mentors, they are valuable to what I feel like is any field and pretty much any life. And so I told my mentor as I was finishing up that first book, I said, I really want to write a book on personal development. And we sat there and we just wrote down a lot of the things that I had learned from mentors. And it's funny, when the book actually came out, I think it was just basically 82 different concepts in personal development. And I remember I was like, his name's Tom, my business public speaking mentor. I said, Tom, I just want to put this stuff out of my head and onto something. Like, I don't even care if this book sells, because for me, that's how I felt like I could leave impact. It's like, if I were to pass away tomorrow, that book would still be out there where people could learn and look back at a lot of the principles that influenced me to be able to get the results that I've gotten. And people are now seeing that the results I've gotten in the fitness world, they directly align to the results that I've been getting in the public speaking and the business world. It's the same concepts. And that's what I highly encourage people to understand. Like, the results to climbing the mountain are very similar no matter the field. But most people will never climb that mountain because they limit the thinking of what is possible. And because they limit the thinking, they avoid reaching out to the people that can help them climb that mountain. They avoid reading the books. They avoid the long nights where you're trying to figure out what the people who have climbed that mountain have did to be able to get there. And so a lot of the answers are already out there from the people who understood, in my mind, what impact is, which is taking the stuff inside of your head and putting it out there to the world, whether it's through speaking, whether it's through video content, whether it's through writing, or even writing a whole book.
So how many books in are you at this point?
So I wrote 5 books. I put out my 5th one last year, and then I actually stopped taking interest in writing books for now. And what I'm writing now is I'm writing a lot of comedy. So my mentor said, you should write every day. And so after that last book I put out, which took me a while, the last book took me probably about 2 years because I thought I was going to write another book. I wrote it and I didn't like it. And eventually, after, I don't know the exact time frame, eventually after 6 to 12 months, I said, screw that. I'm going to write a book on public speaking. So I actually switched the book I was writing, and then that took probably another year. And so I got that book out and I said, you know what? I've been working on comedy. I've been writing comedy. I think this is where I want to put my focus towards writing right now, because my mentor said, just write every day, write every day, write every day. And so I can't say I'm perfect with writing every day, but I feel like I've been writing very consistently since I put that book out. And a lot of it has been comedy. So I had my favorite comedian. He came to my conference last weekend, A2BCon, and I got to interview him. And I told him, I said, what would you tell speakers that are trying to make it? They're trying to get these paid speaking gigs. They're getting better with their speaking, but they're not making the return on investment that they want right away. And I told him, I said, I tell speakers, give it at least 3 years, like at least 3 years of fully committing to getting better at speaking, to making reach outs, to making connections, to going to events where you're seeing other speakers speak, to figure out what you got to do to get on those stages. And he said, I think that's fine. But like for comedy, I never looked at a timetable. He said, I was going to commit to doing 1,000 shows. And then after 1,000 shows, I would figure out if I was going to keep going or if I was going to kind of lay it up. And yesterday I'm like, you know what? I wonder how many comedy shows that I've did. And I counted 39. So I'm like, man, I got a long ways to go. And I don't do comedy to be like a touring comedian. I do comedy because it's helping me a lot better at teaching public speaking. And it's given me more diversity in what I do. Like last year, I posted one of my jokes from my comedy show, and this lady who I'm friends with, she goes, hey, can you come MC my event in Las Vegas? I need someone who can make people laugh. And I ended up getting paid, I think, a day or two after that conversation. And I went out to Las Vegas, and that event was one of the best times of my life.
I love it, man. I love it.
Yeah.
With the comedy, what is some of those through lines that you draw from public speaking and comedy? Like you say, obviously you like comedy, but the goal isn't to do it to be a touring comedian. The goal is to do it to create more impact for your clients, for those speakers, so you can always show up for them and bring new insights and new ideas and new talent. So I totally understand that. But what can you give us an example of what and how it's helped you so far?
Yeah, I think one of the things that frustrated me about the public speaking world, and I'm very fortunate, I had a really, really good mentor. So my mentor, I asked him, I said, I retook his speaker school 4 years later because I was curious. I'd started teaching, which he encouraged me to start teaching. And And I retook it with a different intention. I was looking for different things like practice habits and stuff like that. And I said, how much do you practice a speech before you give it? And he said, Brandon, I practice a speech at least 5 times before I give it. And I said, Tom, you're speaking for 3 days straight right now. You're telling me you practice this at least 5 times? He said, Brandon, if people are going to take their time, energy, effort, and spend money to come see me teach, to come see me give a keynote, you better bet your ass I'm going to make sure to get my practice sessions in so I can deliver the value that they deserve. And I said, man, I am maybe practicing like 1, 2 times before a speech. And so that really hit me. This was 3 years ago. That really hit me how much harder the greats work than the average speaker. And so as I started studying more and more speakers after that, and I started applying the practice habits that he was talking about, I had started to see my transitions got a lot better. I started to see my eye contact with the crowd got a lot better, not only with me, but their eyes were opening up. They were more attentive. They were leaning in. And I started to see an enthusiasm with my tonality, with my confidence go up, just because I had already worked out a lot of the kinks in my practice runs. And so as I started studying more speakers and I started getting better, not only at speaking, but teaching, I started to realize that a lot of speakers out there have awful practice habits. They're really hard to listen to for long periods of time. And quite frankly, they were not good role models for what I was looking for. And I was looking for how to be the best. And most speakers who are out there on the circuit just aren't that great. And that's not a knock on them, because one of the reasons behind that is because they're not focused on that. They're focused on their business. They're focused on the whirlwind that's going on in that business. And a lot of times they're doing that because they know they need to do it. Now, when I started studying comedians, I started seeing people who were looking at a craft. They were looking at this like an art, like a piece of artwork. And so a lot of these comedians, they go to like 5, 6, 7, maybe even more open mic nights a week. They're writing almost every day. They're looking back at their footage. They're talking to people after to see like, hey, you know, what connected, what didn't? Okay, like, how would you say that better the next time? And so I started to see a work ethic in comedians that wasn't even close to most speakers I saw out there. There are very few exceptions in the speaking world. So I don't want someone to watch this and be like, oh, well, blah, 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 does this. Listen, I'm saying in general, comedians work 10 times harder than speakers. There are some exceptions in the speaking world, but in general, that's what it is. So my mentor, he would make me laugh. If we went out to dinner, he'd make me laugh like the entire dinner. And he understood how important comedy was to becoming a good speaker. And so he would tell this joke about the airport. And it would just be like going to the Orlando airport, the kids throwing up on your foot because they had too much candy at Disney World. And then stepping into the cab after a long day traveling in the Orlando airport, kids screaming at you. And then you step into the cab and there's a puddle right there. Your foot's all soaked. And then he would tell this 15-minute story about just random things about his trip to the Orlando airport. And then he would tie that into quality customer service when they took care of him at the hotel and gave him a free dinner. So he did this like 14 minutes of just like you were laughing the whole time. And then he would tie it into a personal development concept. And then I see Trevor Noah at one of the speaker schools that we taught. We took everyone to see Trevor Noah. And I see 15 minutes of his skit is about the airport, just funny things that happen at the airport, you know, like the overweight person sitting next to you, like makes you feel like. And so then he was talking about like the intercom, how you could barely ever hear what they're saying. Oh, now loading the plane. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that public speaking and comedy, there's a direct correlation. And that's when I first understood that comedy was actually possible. And 3 or 4 months later, I never did an open mic. I just knew how to get people in a room. I rented out a room. I sold the tickets. And we probably had like we set it up for 50 people. We probably had like 70 plus people there. And so my first time doing comedy, I was doing 15 minutes in front of, it was definitely felt like a sold out room. I mean, the place was packed. People were standing all around the seat area. And that's not recommended. Most people go to open mics and you do that for a while and then they get a show. But I didn't really know. I was kind of fearless. I was just like, I want to try this out. And luckily in that 15 minutes, I was able to hit like 3 or 4 jokes. I'm not going to act like the whole 15 minutes was great, but I was able to hit 3 or 4 jokes of just like things I would talk about. Like when I was introducing myself to someone new at the bar, I always hated when the first question was like, what do you do? Because I felt like it was an automatic judgment. Like no matter what I said, whether I was like, oh, I'm a CEO of a company, or I'm a stripper at the Gallery, the #1 strip club in Stamford, Connecticut. Like no matter what I said, there was automatic judgment. So I just started having a lot of fun with that. And so there was this one girl I met, and it was at this rooftop bar, and she goes, oh, hey, what do you do? I go, oh, I'm actually in the adult film industry. And I kid you not, she goes like this, oh, you're in the adult film industry? I said, girl, put your eyes up here. That's all I do, my subscribers. And like, that experience to me was just so funny. And I told that in the skit. I had to, touch it up a little bit, but I put that in the skit and people were dying. And then I turned that into a clip. And all of a sudden people started looking at me as a comedian, but it was just like a story that I thought was funny. And I said in the beginning, if I'm going to do comedy, I want to tie it into personal development. So in reality, I was just telling a story about how like loosen up when you meet new people, and it ended up working. So, but with that said, I go to open mics a lot and I bomb a lot. I hit jokes sometimes and it feels really good. And then sometimes I don't. I'm at show 39. Phil said he did 1,000 shows before he figured out if he wanted to do it or if he was going to quit. So it's a process towards getting better. That's why with the speaker schools, like I can do an hour and a half of a business speech just with nothing planned. Like I have a structure where I can work with the people in the audience and make it sound so natural, just like a comedian does crowd work. Comedy, I can't do that. I've been public speaking for 7 to 10 years, depending on when you would measure that by. So I feel very confident with things like that. But comedy, I'm only getting close to 2 years in. And so there's certain things that are like, I know I need more repetition before I can actually do that. So yeah, that's how to kind of answer your question. That was how I started seeing the similarities in each. And then I was like, oh, I kind of like this. And so I've just started doing more and more of it because I've started noticing when I go to businesses, when I go to business conferences, when I'm speaking on podcasts, I've started to understand like there's something that I can do a little different than most, which is to like make it a little bit more fun.
You're right. You're right. It's so serious, the industry and the world that we live in around the personal development side. And I think, I had a gentleman on the podcast the other day, and we were talking about how the world and the societal norms, they push you into a world you think you want or you think you need to be successful. And we forget those things that light us up, or those quirky little miracle moments that are funny. And, we've got to get back to who we are. And it sounds like you enjoy comedy. You also see the business side of it. You see the gains around the talent and the execution and the different tricks and tips and strategy. But I think one of the biggest things that you said was, you're at show 39 looking to get to 1,000. And I think that so many people in this world today, and for me for several years, right? I'm not pointing any fingers. I was that person that it was all about time, right? Because I like to protect my time. I like to manage my time. One of my strengths is strategic, right? So I'm very routine. I live off the calendar. but you can't look at the time of honing in a skill the same way you look at how you manage your calendar, how you spend your time. It's the reps. So it could be a year if you did 1,000 shows in the first year. It could be 5 years if you did 1,000 shows and it took you 5 years. And everybody has a different season of life and things that are prioritized based on what you're going through and where you're at. So how can I say, hey, it's going to take me 1 year and Brandon's doing this 6 to 7 times a night, and I just had my second child and am not going out in the evenings for the first 6 months, right? Which Mike nights are typically nights. So it's an interesting concept that you share, but I'm just so grateful that you call the spade, with all the things you're doing and you stepping into the comedy side of things. What are words of wisdom that you would share with someone who's scared to dive into the comedy side? Because, being completely honest and candid, I want to go to an open mic night for comedy, but I'm scared.
Yeah. Well, open mic it's a very safe space. I mean, it's a place where a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are kind of pushing through the 5 minutes, including myself, many of the nights. And when you watch the Jerry Seinfeld documentary, you realize the greatest out there, he struggles with a lot of the same things. It's part of the thing with comedy is like, it's a little bit harder to practice on your own. Like you write the jokes, you kind of go through it in your head. You can even speak it out on your own, but there's being able to feel an audience, like being able to feel laugh or being able to feel that, like, what is he talking about? So just understand it's a safe space. Like everyone in there gets it. Like it's not, there's a reason why you're not performing a show with what you're trying there. So that is one thing, but understand, like, if you're looking to be a better speaker, you don't necessarily have to go to open mic nights. A lot of times it's just like you're in a conversation with someone at a networking event or a podcast and you realize that story hits and it's like, okay, let me practice this. Let me get this in a speech. And then let me make sure that I'm having fun with this. And if you're having fun with it, then the crowd is probably going to have more fun with it. For example, there's a story I've been telling in public speaking for a while that I wouldn't necessarily say this is comedy or not, but I start having fun with it. When I was 23 years old, I was in Viva Las Vegas at my first real personal development event. So it's just like I'm setting the tone with the story in a little bit more of a fun way. But there was another time where I was 22, 23, and I used to go out to the bars with my friends. I would look forward to Friday nights. Why? Because the guys, we could talk to the girls. And one day there was these two cute girls next to me and I couldn't even look in their direction because of the fear that I'd get rejected. And so I got back home that night and I would always kind of study myself out about what could I do better. And I realized that I couldn't go through the rest of my life not going up and approaching people that I felt like I wanted to meet, whether it was a cute girl or someone in the business world. So not too far after that, I was at that same bar and I saw this cute girl down there. Just to give you some context, if she said she was going to be Miss April for Playboy magazine, it wouldn't it wouldn't surprise me. She was definitely a 10 out of 10 on a bad day. So you could see how I'm just adding little things in there that make you have more fun with the conversation. And so I think a lot of times speakers, they think they have to tell it, like if they want to get like add humor into their stories, they have to just hit these jokes. But a lot of times if you're just having fun with the conversation as a speaker, it comes across a lot better. And that does relate to comedy, but I think a lot of times speakers, what they should practice is actually the stories they want to tell in their speeches. They should practice them at networking events and see if people are like this, then it's probably a good story to tell. If people are kind of doing one of these, I'm going to go talk to.
I got to go use the restroom. I'll be back.
Yeah. So that's what I tell people. I'm like, I have so many speakers that go through the speaker schools that won't go to events if they're not speaking. And I'm thinking, man, you're missing out on so much opportunities, because if there's networking at an event, there's an opportunity to speak. And that's what I don't think a lot of speakers understand. And that's where you're able to get so much feedback. Like, I get how a bar could be a toxic place, but that's where I've honed in on a lot of communication skills, because you're able to talk to so many people throughout a night. Now, if that's not your place, I totally understand, but maybe go to the Chamber of Commerce events where there's networking after. Maybe go to a Jim Morris impact dinner where you can meet 20 people there, and you're home by, I don't know what time you're home by, but maybe you're home by 9 o'clock. Maybe those are better places for you. Maybe you go to a workout class and you say, hey, I got to talk to one person after the class. And so I think a lot of people think that, like, when I talk about comedy, oh, you would have to go to open mics to get better. You don't really have to do that. You get better at comedy, you get better at communication by talking to more people. And what I realized was, so when I was younger, I would go out on these dates and I would always just try and learn. And one of the things that I was really good at was asking questions and then just listening. And this one girl, I met her out at the bar, and then I asked her out. We were getting the frozen yogurt. We were just chilling there. And I was asking her questions pretty much the entire time. And she talked the entire time. And she said, Brandon, like, this was really fun, but it would be nice to get to know you a little bit more too. And that started to plant a seed in my mind that maybe I had to start opening up a little bit more as well. And then not too much longer after that, one of her friends who I was hanging out with at a Sunday football, there was a group of us. She said, Brandon, I enjoy talking to you, but every time we talk, I feel like I'm on an interview. And I don't want to feel that way. She said, maybe you should ask a little less questions. And I said, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. And I referred back to that date that I had with her friend. And I started to realize that if I was going to be someone that could have a mutual conversation, I would have to open up too. I would have to talk as well. And so the more and more you do of that in a networking setting, the more and more you get a feel of how to actually have a conversation without barely asking questions, but still participating. And essentially, if you watch some of the best TED Talks out there, what are they? They're just conversations with the crowd.
It makes so much sense, man. So much sense. Thank you for just sharing your stories and sharing the real raw side of developing communication, right? Because I think at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be as hard as we sometimes make it, right? Public speaking being one of the biggest fears of humans in the world, but yet we do it every single day, whether it's to our partner, to a spouse, to a friend, to a cousin, to a family member. Shit, I talk to my dog every day. Yeah. And he don't talk back. So, at the end of the day, it's like I'm conversing and communicating at a high level always. How do I just take some of those things and leverage the tool in hand to use it in a way that will increase the learning, increase the development, increase the communication style as I navigate through it? It's such a powerful lesson. One thing I want to go back to real quick, and then I want to dive into your event and putting on events and all that, because we had a great conversation the other week. And I want to talk a little bit about that. But you had mentioned Jerry Seinfeld and, the testing the jokes and doing all that and, putting in the work and not hitting on stuff and kind of going through it. And then you talked about when we do podcasts and stuff, stories come up. So this is a story that popped into my head as you were saying this that I haven't thought about since the day it happened. So when I met Caitlin, we were doing all the things, right? My wife, we're going to the concert. We're going to the bars. We're going to this. We're doing that. We started going to some comedy shows, and we saw Chris Rock in Nashville at Zany's. And one of the things that I realized was, we're like front row balcony. So we got there early. We were fired up, and, he's going and he's doing his thing. And there's a gentleman to the right, sitting by himself, and he's got some bling on, right? He's probably got, an $80,000 watch on, and he's taking notes like crazy. And he's looking around, and I'm like, what the fuck is that guy doing? Like, he's kind of sketching me out. Who is that dude? So Jim Morris, being Jim Morris, I go over and I'm like, what's up, brother? Like, hey, you're looking all over, your head's on a swivel, you're writing notes. Like, what's the deal, man? And he's like, I work for Chris. And I was like, oh, cool. Like, what are you doing though? Like, are you like copying his jokes or making them better? And he's like, no, I'm analyzing the crowd reactions because this is a test show for his special coming up. So my job is to analyze the response, because everything he's telling you is a test to get feedback to then go work on those jokes for the Netflix special. And it hit me, and I'm like, man, that strategy of practice, that strategy of refinement, that strategy of showing up, that strategy of someone who is massive in that industry, yet is coming to Nashville to do a small show. I think tickets were like $22. And, I jumped on it. I'm like, let's go. I want to see him. But it was also one of those things where it was like, wow, he's running a process that we can all run, just probably on a little bit smaller of a scale. And he's at the highest level in this industry. He's done so much, movies, all of it. And he's out here testing in front of a crowd, not knowing what the responses are going to be. And he's smart enough to instill a system, right? Here's my business development side, instill a system in place and ask someone for help to analyze the crowd. So what he was doing was he was labeling like the jokes by number, because obviously there was a practice set. And then he was scoring crowd response and like laughs and interactions and who's hooting and hollering and yelling. And it was just so cool to see that, because of, him being at such a high level, but yet he's out here doing the hard thing, doing the thing that he's probably scared of, could be embarrassed. And I'll round this story out with the fact that some of his jokes sucked. Some of his jokes didn't hit.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, the first couple, I was kind of like, did homeboy lose it?
Mm-hmm.
Like I was kind of like, this is not what and then he crushed some, and then he, one kind of fell off, and you could see he kind of pivoted. And it was just really cool to analyze it, like you were saying, from a different perspective when you go in with trying to look through the lens of understanding speaking, understanding comedy, understanding all those types of things. So what you were saying, man, hits home, and it hits deep, and it just brought that story up that I haven't thought about since it happened.
Yeah. For speaking, like, who have you ever seen anyone speak over 2 hours for a straight keynote?
I've seen someone do an hour and a half.
Yeah. So I can do a 2.5 hour keynote. And the only people that I've heard like that can actually do this are Tony Robbins, and I've seen Dr. Joe Dispenza work a crowd for hours. So other than that, I don't know. I'm sure there is people out there who can do what I do, but very few people in this world could give a 2.5 hour minute keynote that keeps people engaged. And so what a lot of people don't see is how many years I've been working on this keynote, how many times I've delivered this keynote, even when I give it. So I'll have to give it May 16th and 17th for the next speaker school. I still practice that keynote 5 times before I give it. And so that's what a lot of people don't see. I wrote a book on this entire keynote. So I've thought about this stuff so much. And then every time I'm like trying to take stuff out, add stuff in, take stuff out, add stuff in. And then every time I feel like my stamina gets better. The last 2 times I've given this talk, I'm like, wow, My voice didn't really feel like it was going. I felt not as faded. Like, if you, just to give you some context, when you're talking for 2.5 hours, it's hard to keep the brain processing as quick as it needs to process and the mouth moving as smooth as it needs to move. But what happens is the more repetitions you get, the more your body is trained how to be able to handle this. And like, I've given this talk barely sleep. So sometimes when you travel, things just don't work out as smoothly as you want. And there was one time I gave this talk, I had some stuff going on the night before. I got like 3 hours of sleep, barely ate the day of, and I pushed through the entire talk. There was times in that talk I felt like I was going to pass out, but I didn't. I kept going. I kept pushing through. And the next time I knew, hey, Brandon, you're going to have to sleep better. You're going to have to make sure you get up a little bit earlier so you can eat and you don't feel super rushed going into that talk. And so you pick up all these things along the way that make you better and better. And so I may have a long way to go in comedy, but in public speaking, there's very few people at the level that I'm at, because I practice this over and over and over and over and over again. And when I do other talks, the reason they're able to get longer and flow better much quicker than most is because I've been able to do this with this talk. So I really encourage people to look at, when you're developing a keynote talk, to make sure that you're just not going to be that great at it if you deliver it once. You're just not. Like, it has room to grow, just like Chris Rock knew his Netflix special had so much room to grow. Like, these comedians, when you really study them, they're taking about 8 to 12 months to be able to get this ready for a comedy special or a Netflix special. So for you to develop a speech the week before you have to give it, prepare it, practice it, and present it, and to think that speech has reached its peak, it's ridiculous. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. So what I encourage people to do is get really good at giving a 5-minute keynote. If you can get really good at giving a 5-minute keynote, you're going to understand transitions. You're going to understand flow. You're going to understand practice time. Once you get good at a 5-minute keynote, then get to 15 to 20-minute keynotes and spend some time getting 4 to 5 different of those talks. If you could get 4 to 5 different of those talks, you're going to understand how to work an audience, how to get in the flow of a speech. It's hard in a 5-minute. In a 15 to 20-minute, you're going to understand that. So if you can do that with 4 to 5 different topics, all of a sudden you can probably combine a lot of those topics into a 60 to 75-minute speech. But you've gotten the repetitions with those speeches because you've probably given each one of those 1, 2, 3, or 4 times. So now you're a lot more prepared for the longer speech. And if you don't want to listen to me, don't listen to me. But trust me, every person will make this mistake if they try and jump to a 60-minute talk. And that mistake is, you don't understand the artwork of transitions. You don't understand the artwork of making the most use out of your time. And you don't understand how to keep an audience engaged for that amount of time. You don't. I've seen people time and time and time again try and jump from just starting out into speaking to a 60 to 75-minute talk. And what happens? You're relying on your slides. You're using a ton of filler words. You're wasting a bunch of time with facts that don't click to a human being with the emotional connection that they need to want to keep listening to you. And it just doesn't work. So get good at 5-minute speeches, then get good at a diverse group of 15 to 20-minute speeches. If you can do that, then you're going to be ready for those 45, 60, 75-minute keynotes. And then take that main keynote and do it a bunch. Like, give it all over. And then you're going to have something that's really, 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 really special.
I love it, man. I love it. I love it. Dropping bombs right now, everybody. Everybody listening better have their notepad out. If you're in the car, pull over. We don't want you to crash.
Re-listen to it.
But thank you, man. Thanks for dropping that wisdom. All right. Last question before we wrap up. You do events, you do conferences, speaker school, different states, different cities. Tell me about your experience. Share kind of what that's been like, some of the wins, some of the challenges, some of the obstacles. I know you just had a conference, you had a speaker coming, wasn't able to make it, you had to pivot, you had someone else come that was absolutely freaking amazing. Like, talk us through some of those wins, some of those challenges, and the real raw honest truth around events and big conferences.
Yeah, I mean, events, it can be very stressful. So if you're looking to get into the events game, my best advice is to have a reason why you're having the event. So my goal is to have 10,000 student universities across 10 of the best cities in the United States. So I have a goal. And that's what's pushed me to do the conferences and the speaker schools, the TEDx event. Like, that's what's pushed me to do all of those events. Now, with that said, events also give people something to look forward to. So if you're a business owner, I do think it's important to have events because it gives people something to look forward to. Just understand why you're doing the event. Am I doing it to get more leads? Am I doing it to make sure more people are spreading the word through word of mouth? Am I doing it because I just want to get practice speaking? Am I doing it because I have a lot of employees here and I feel like they should get appreciated for all the work that they do? Like, what is the reason that you're doing that? If you can figure out those things, it's going to be a lot more easier to push through the challenges that come with events because there's a lot of them. So with my big vision, my goal is that every Friday in the universities, the thousands of students, they come into the arena, but they don't come into the arena to watch people shoot 3-pointers or to bump a volleyball. They come to the arena to see someone take the stage with a mic in their hand and deliver value to the thousands of students for Fired Up Friday. And my vision is that it's a lot of people like Jim Morris, like people that have grown with me along the way that have done some inspiring stuff, and they take the mic in front of those thousands and thousands of college students and they deliver some value, and the students are fired up. So that's the big vision. But when I had that big vision, I said, man, I need to do two things. I need to figure out how to help people make money, and I need to figure out how to get people in a room. And so I had been in the events game since I was 14. I had worked pretty big golf tournaments since I was 14 years old. So I had seen the power of events and how it can bring a community together. It would, once a year, this golf event I would work, it would bring the whole town together and the surrounding towns. And so as I got older, I started working events. I started interning at golf courses, and they would have consistent events. But then I hosted college parties with my college roommates. And so I started to learn what it was like to be able to have an event the same day as another, like the soccer house. We were the golf house. How could you have an event where people would say, hey, they want to come here instead of there? I started to realize what people enjoyed about coming to the parties. I started to realize, hey, there were certain nights where we would make money off the kegs, and then there were certain nights where barely anyone would show up. So I started to understand the marketing side of things. And so when I got into the events game, I knew that it was important to make sure people had fun. And so in 2019, I had a musician showcase night where the musicians, there was 4 musicians that were on the rise. They came and they performed. I rented out the venue. I got the artists. I got the interns. I thought everything was good. What did I forget about? The number one and most important thing to events, which is filling the room. And so with a week left, I think I had a handful of tickets sold. I called my mentor. I said, what the heck do I do? And he said, well, you fucked up. Sorry if we can't use that. He said, you messed up. He said, you should still have the event, but you're going to lose money. He said, partner with a local nonprofit, tell people they can bring a donation of food instead of buy a ticket, and that will help you get people to fill the event. You could write that as a tax write-off and still have a successful event. I did that. We probably had 60 to 80 people that showed up that day. The event turned out to be a success. My bank account didn't. So in 2021, when my big vision came and I said, I got to start having events, I said, the number one thing I'm going to focus on is selling tickets first. And so I didn't have a venue. I didn't have any guest speakers. All I did was put together a landing page on Eventbrite. Not like I even had that great of a landing page. I put together an Eventbrite page. I said, I'm going to have this event on October 2nd. And I put it out there. I started letting people know. I had 4 $200 tickets sold that night. And I realized that a lot of the stuff that you worry about in events has no relevance if you can't get people into the room and make sure you're generating revenue for that event. So anyone who's looking into events, I would say make sure you understand why you're having the event. And then 2, make sure that you make it fun, because if it's fun, it's going to be a lot easier to get people in there. And then 3, make sure you focus first on selling tickets and getting people to commit to coming to the event. And that makes everything else easier.
I love it, man. I love it. It's so interesting because I think without mentorship around events, without going to someone that's done it like you or like me or anybody else in your community or your circle, you're going to go through the same thing that Brandon just talked about, right? I went through it. Everybody that I've spoken to has gone through it. I know someone who's lost $540,000 on an event because they just did the things that fulfilled the space rather than put the people in the space.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, it comes back to one of the most important strategies around business is how much time are you spending on revenue producing activities, right?
Yeah.
I call them RPAs. What's your RPA level? Because at the end of the day, you can build the best thing and not be known. You can build the best thing and no one comes to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times now, because I've done so many events, and I'm sure similar to you, especially with, you know, your friend or your partner here in what he's doing in his business and his events, but people start to come to you, and similar to your mentor, he's like, you got a week left, you're fucked, right? Like, do this, like you're not getting out of it. And now I often tell people, if you're thinking about an event, thinking about it, let's just jump on a quick call for 5-10 minutes, because the one lesson I need to teach you is what is your systems, not to pull off the event, but to get people in the room. Like, do you have marketing experience? No, we outsource that to a company. Okay, who's doing the marketing for the event? Oh, I never thought about that. Like, okay, how are you going to follow up with people? How are you going to email them? How are you going to text them? How are you going to remind them? What systems do you have in place? And a lot of times people don't have those systems. And you've got two types of people. The ones who was similar to me in my first big event that just says, fuck it, let's just push through, we'll figure it out. You got the other side that's like, you know what, let me go build the systems. And I think just probing that question and asking someone, what side do you want to be on, sets up the experience to understand the expectation. Like, if you don't have the systems, it's probably not going to go as well. The other thing is, now I've been in a place where a lot of people are calling me a week before, 2 weeks before, going, Jim, I'm screwed.
Yeah.
And when you were saying that what your mentor said,
Yeah.
I was like, you're not going to fix it in a week or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to make the decision now. And even if you don't sleep, even if you hire a team of 5, like, you're probably not going to hit it, because you need the reps on the sales side to understand the messaging and the visibility and the marketing, right? So if I go in with a concept, Brandon, and you know this, I go in with a new concept. I did this 2 months ago with one of my Beyond the Table dinners around dream making and clarifying and identifying dreams. But I had to understand the fact that this is a new concept, and how much time and energy am I going to spend on ensuring that people understand the messaging before I even put it out to people. So I created rules around the event, and I sent them to my friends and was like, what do you think of these rules? And the rules were actually the messaging and the marketing, but I did it in a different context. And people are like, holy shit, this is so different. This is cool. And similar to the Chris Rock, right? I'm getting the feedback before I go put it on Facebook and, put it on Instagram. That event sold out in 12 hours. And the reality of it is I tested the market around people I know, like, and trust. And I have a community, right? I have Impact Effect, a community of people. We've got the digital app. We've got a safe space to have these conversations. So, when someone says, Jim, your community and all the things you're doing, it's great. It's like, well, I also get to experience community as well, right? I also get to go to the comfortable, safe space and ask people. And I say friends because a lot of the community members are friends at this point, but I get that opportunity as well. So, man, what a great conversation, brother. Thank you so much for spending some time today and just pouring it out and giving us some value. We'll leave with this. How can we find you? What's coming up next? Like, you guys got to plug in with Brandon, especially if you're up on the East Coast, Boston, New York, Connecticut, Jersey, Philly. Make the drive, whether it's 6 hours or 4 or 2 or 1, and get to one of his events, one of his speaker schools, because it's so worth it. And I know so many people, I've had people on my stages that have come out of his speaking school and have absolutely crushed it. So I know his product because I've seen it. I've actually seen it on my stage. But I'll let you riff and run. Tell us where we can find you and how to connect.
Yeah, so pretty much all social medias, Brandon Gaydorus. And then my phone number is 607-348-6136. Feel free to contact me at any time. And yeah, we got a speaker school tour coming up. We got May 16th and 17th, Stamford, Connecticut. Then we got Austin, Texas, June 20th and 21st. And then we got Laguna Beach, California, July 25th and 26th. So we're kind of touching all areas for the most part of the US on this mini tour. And yeah, excited for the summer, the spring, and to make some impact.
Let's go.